I want to start with a feeling that doesn't usually get named out loud. Not failure, not crisis, not regret. Just this quiet, persistent sense of being behind in life. Not dramatically behind, not enough to panic, just enough that it hums in the background. You look around and it feels like other people started earlier, moved faster, figured something out you missed. You're doing things, you're functioning, you're even growing, and still there's this sense that you're late to your own life. I felt this, and I know people who on paper have won at life and they feel it too. It's the itch you can't quite scratch because you can't even point to where it's coming from. Let's think this through, because what makes this feeling especially destabilizing is that it often shows up in people who are thoughtful, self-aware, and trying to live deliberately. These aren't people asleep at the wheel. These are people paying attention. And that's part of what makes it so confusing. If I'm this reflective, why do I still feel like I'm falling behind?
Hello and welcome to The Psychology of Us with Professor RJ Starr, where we explore the mind's influence on life, relationships, and society. RJ Starr is an existential psychologist, professor, and author dedicated to exploring the core challenges of human existence, how we find meaning, embrace responsibility, and navigate life's challenges. Known for a thought-provoking yet accessible approach, RJ inspires listeners to cultivate self-awareness, emotional intelligence, authenticity, and purpose. This podcast is designed for all psychology enthusiasts, practitioners, students, and anyone curious about why we think, feel, and behave the way we do. Each episode unpacks theories, explores complex questions, and offers insights that deepen understanding of the human experience. So settle in, stay curious, and discover the psychology of us.
Most people assume this feeling means something about their choices, that they picked wrong, waited too long, missed a window that everyone else somehow caught. But what rarely gets examined is whether the idea of being behind actually makes psychological sense in the first place. Behind compared to what? Behind according to whose timeline? We live in a culture that quietly treats life like a race with invisible checkpoints. Career by this age, stability by that age, confidence by some imaginary deadline no one ever agreed on. It shows up in the 30 under 30 lists, the LinkedIn updates, the family dinner question that sounds casual but isn't. So what's next for you? This pressure isn't just in your head, it's backed by a massive cultural infrastructure. We are currently living through a historical lag between our expectations and our reality. For example, if you look at the U.S. Census Bureau data from the mid-20th century compared to today, the average age of first-time homebuyers and first-time parents has shifted by nearly a full decade. In 1960, the median age for marriage was 20 for women and 23 for men. Today, those numbers have climbed to 28 and 30. Yet our internal software, the part of us that listens to our parents' stories or watches old movies, is still running on the 1960s operating system. We are measuring 2,026 lives with 1950s rulers. We see statistics that show 50% of people in their 20s are still living with parents or receive financial assistance, yet the individual feels a personal sense of shame for not being independent by 22. This is a statistical impossibility for the majority, yet we treat it as a personal moral failing. We are also the first generation to deal with infinite choice paralysis. Sociologists call this the paradox of choice. When you have 100 possible paths, the 99 paths you didn't take feel like ghosts haunting the one you did. We feel behind, not because we aren't moving, but because we are aware of every other direction we could have gone. We aren't just comparing ourselves to our neighbors anymore. We are comparing our real life to 1,000 theoretical lives we see online. And when your life doesn't line up neatly with that template, the mind doesn't say, maybe the template is flawed. It says, something must be wrong with me. Comparison is doing a lot of invisible work here. It's not just something we do on social media. It's a background orientation system, a way the mind tries to locate safety, belonging, and legitimacy. And in a world with endless visibility into other people's curated timelines, that system is constantly overstimulated. So if you find yourself thinking, I know comparison isn't helpful, but I can't seem to stop, hear this clearly. That doesn't mean you're weak or undisciplined. It means your mind is responding exactly as it was built to, in an environment it was never designed for. What I want to do in this episode is slow this whole experience down. Not to talk you out of the feeling, but to understand it. Because once you understand what the sense of being behind is actually responding to, it starts to lose its authority. For most people, this feeling doesn't register as a vague insecurity. It feels like an accurate assessment. It feels obvious. Of course I'm behind. Just look around. The mind is very good at building convincing stories out of partial information. Comparison gives it a steady stream of material. You see outcomes without context, milestones without process, confidence without the years of uncertainty that came before it. And the brain does what it always does. It fills in the gaps. What it fills them in with is timing. They figured it out earlier. They moved faster. They didn't hesitate like I did. But psychologically, timing is a slippery metric. The mind treats it as objective when it isn't. We confuse visibility with progress. We confuse decisiveness with correctness. We confuse someone being loud about their life with them being further along in it. There's also something developmental happening. Early in life, there really are timelines. School moves in grades. Skills build in sequence. Progress is externally structured and socially synchronized. So the psyche learns something very quietly and very deeply. Forward motion has a look, a rhythm, a schedule. Then adulthood happens, and the structure dissolves. The expectation remains, but the guardrails are gone. There's no longer a shared clock. Yet the mind keeps searching for one. And when it can't find an internal marker for where it is, it scans externally. How am I doing compared to them? Am I on pace? Am I late? This isn't a personal flaw, it's an orientation problem. Add the modern environment to that. We're exposed to more curated life data in a day than previous generations encountered in a lifetime. The mind was built to compare itself to a small, stable group. Now, it's comparing itself to thousands of edited narratives that highlight outcomes, not trajectories. So the feeling of being behind gains momentum, not because it's true, but because it's repeatedly triggered. And here's the part people rarely consider. The sense of being behind isn't just cognitive, it's emotional. It carries anxiety, urgency, and pressure to catch up. The body gets involved. The nervous system tightens. It's the shallow breath when you open the app. A restless energy at 2 a.m. when you should be sleeping, but you're mentally auditing your life. This 2 a.m. mental audit is actually a survival mechanism. Your brain's primary job is to keep you safe within a tribe. In our evolutionary past, being behind or out of sync with the tribe meant potential exile, which meant death. So when your brain perceives that you are behind your peers, it triggers the amygdala. It's a low-grade fight or flight response. This is why you can't simply logic your way out of the feeling. You are trying to use the prefrontal cortex, the logical thinking part of the brain, to argue with the brainstem, which is screaming that you're in danger because you don't have a house hunt promotion partner yet. Research in neurobiology suggests that when we engage in upward social comparison, looking at people we perceive as better off, our brain actually registers a drop in serotonin. We feel a literal loss of status. Your body isn't just being dramatic, it is reacting to a perceived loss of social safety. The tightness in the chest is your nervous system trying to mobilize you to catch up so you don't get left behind by the pack. But in the modern world, the pack is an algorithm, and the race has no finish line. We are burning out, trying to win a race that our biology thinks is life or death, but is actually just a marketing narrative. Once that happens, logic doesn't touch it very easily. You can know that comparison isn't fair, that everyone's path is different, that life isn't a race, and still feel the weight of lateness in your chest. Because the feeling isn't trying to tell the truth about your worth, it's trying to resolve uncertainty. The mind would rather believe I'm behind than sit with, I don't know where I am right now. You see, certainty, even painful certainty, feels stabilizing. Underneath the thought, I'm behind in this life, there's almost always an unexamined assumption that life is supposed to move in a single orderly sequence, that there's a right pace, a correct order, a normal timeline. Most of us never consciously choose this belief. We absorb it. And when adulthood no longer fits that structure, the old measuring tools stop working, but we keep using them anyway. So when someone says they feel behind, what they often mean is that their internal development no longer matches the external story they think they should be living. Behind in confidence, behind in certainty, behind in having things feel a certain way, having things feel settled. But you see, those aren't linear achievements. They don't arrive on schedule. And they often develop through periods that look stalled from the outside.
Think about the way a bamboo tree grows. For the first 4 years, you see nothing. You water it, you tend the soil, but there is no visible progress, not a single green shoot. To an outside observer, or to the bamboo itself, if it had a LinkedIn profile, it would look like it was behind every other plant in the garden. It would look like a failure. Then, in the 5th year, it grows 80 feet in 6 weeks. Was it behind during those first 4 years? Of course not. It was growing a massive, complex root system that could support 80 feet of height. Human development works exactly the same way. We have root seasons and we have shoot seasons. Our culture only celebrates the shoot seasons, the promotions, the weddings, the launches. But the root seasons, the years of therapy, the quiet mourning of a lost dream, the slow accumulation of self-trust, the boring jobs that pay the bills while we figure out who we are, those are where the stability is built. If you skip the root season because you're in a rush to catch up, you will eventually collapse under the weight of your own success. Being behind is often just another word for grounding. You aren't stalled, you are deepening.
This is where comparison turns from information into judgment. Two people can live outwardly similar lives and experience them very differently. One feels grounded, the other feels late. The difference isn't pace, it's authorship. Who is deciding what counts as progress? Many people are running a borrowed timeline. And as long as that borrowed clock is in charge, life will feel late no matter how much you accomplish. So when the thought, I'm behind, shows up, hear it less as a verdict and more as a signal. Something in your life has outgrown the timeline you're using to measure it. And that doesn't mean you're failing. It often means you're changing. Comparison sticks, not because you don't understand this, but because it has been regulating your nervous system. It's been answering questions about safety and belonging. Letting go of it means tolerating uncertainty, and that's hard. That's hard. What helps isn't trying to stop comparison. What helps is changing what you orient around. Comparison asks, how am I doing relative to others? Authorship asks, is this life actually mine? My buddy just came over to visit. You see, coherence is quieter than progress, but it has a distinct emotional signature. When your choices line up with your values and capacities, life may still be uncertain, but it doesn't feel false. When people orient around authorship, comparison doesn't disappear, it becomes irrelevant.
So how do we actually practice authorship? It starts by auditing your shoulds. Every time the voice in your head says, I should be further along, ask, according to whom? If you strip away the expectations of your parents, your old high school rivals, and the influencers on your feed, what is the actual pace of your soul? Authorship requires a certain kind of productive loneliness. It's the ability to sit in the discomfort of being misunderstood by people who are still running the race. When you choose authorship, you start to value coherence over conformance. Conformance is easy to measure. You just look at the person next to you. Coherence is harder. It requires you to check in with your own integrity. Does this choice feel heavy or light? Does this path make me more like myself or more like a replica of someone else? We often fear that if we stop comparing, we'll stop achieving. We think the anxiety is the fuel, but anxiety is a dirty fuel. It leaves a residue of burnout and resentment. Authorship is a clean fuel. It allows you to move fast when you're ready and stay still when you're not, without the crushing weight of feeling like you're late. You can't be late to a destination that only you are traveling toward.
They stop feeling ahead or behind. They feel present. And that's often the moment life stops feeling like it's happening somewhere else. So if that thought shows up again, I'm behind in life, try meeting it with curiosity instead of argument. What clock am I using right now? And does it actually belong to me? Because when the clock changes, the story does too. I'll leave that with you.
That wraps up this episode of The Psychology of Us with Professor RJ Starr. Each conversation is a step toward greater understanding of ourselves, each other, and the forces that shape human behavior. Listeners are invited to continue the conversation by sharing their thoughts, questions, and topic suggestions at profrjstarr@outlook.com. Every message helps shape future episodes, ensuring the discussions remain relevant, thought-provoking, and meaningful. For those who find value in these explorations, subscribing and leaving a review is a great way to support the podcast and bring these insights to a wider audience. Until next time, stay curious, stay thoughtful, and keep exploring the psychology of us.